The mathematics for a chess-playing Africa. The mathematics for a chess-playing Africa. In my statement of pigeons, you might have curiously spotted Africa as the cat. Chess and maths are indeed birds of a feather, but to add the state of Africa seems slightly paradoxical. Why is it that by my reckoning, I judge that you think that the beauty of mathematical games, and in fact, mathematics herself, are held mutually exclusive in two separate planes of complex thought to the continent of Africa. Africa's challenge is real, mathematics problems imaginary, chess a sheer waste of time, and Africa on its 11th hour. I, Ntalasha Mwansa, needeth have you know that Africa is mathematics' original playing field. I'm here to inform you that the world's continents, excluding Africa, have been engaging within themselves and amongst each other in a game of chess. It's been a chess-playing world against a checkers-playing Africa. When did this start? How did this happen? A quasi-maths game on Africa's grounds. In my desire to make you uncomfortable, less complacent, have you see, help you know. Players of Africa, let me tell you the story that precedes mathematics' exile. The story of Africa from the time and perspective it is predominantly told from. Africa's most unfavorable angle, its least picturesque. To me, as in the minds of Adichie, the most dangerous single story. The tale everyone is at fault for one's telling. The tale that speaks of the time when at the continental board game, Africa started to lose. The infamous story I have dubbed the X-tale. And it goes, the triangular slave trade scarred Africa. Then, when European powers so lighted our continent, they began their scramble for it, a race to exploit African resources and gain African territory. As we approach highly coveted trophies of independence, we talk about colonialism, how it had us become proverbial slaves in our own homes. In the inconclusive early days of post-colonialism, many countries can boast of the better days they dreamt of, turn into a brief reality. The then freedom fighters, then government officials, or what become overly generous towards themselves, beginning to take what belonged to their very own kith and kin. Today, aside from bird watching, which we Africans love and have been praised for, we have found a new phenomenon to gaze at: poverty. Storytellers of the X-tale, show me who granted you the carte blanche to reduce the great Africa to exist only in the belittling bounds of the X-tale. I am placing the blame of Africa's never-ending problems on you. This narrative, unrepentant for its show of black and white fallacy, consistently shifts the responsibility of Africa's betterment from one party to the next, leaving all that lie in the grey areas to go scot-free. First, it was the non-domestic slave traders to blame. Then it was the European scramblers turned colonial rulers. Now, we say it's all the foreign, non-African investors, neo-colonialists are taking from us. Party after party, we are shifting the blame. This X-tale singly frames Africa as the victim. I would like those that pretend not to know that Africans sold Africans first to say I, and those in oblivion that disagree that before the struggles for the scramble for Africa arrived, there was existing conflict between African tribes, may they say nay. And anyone bold, accusing me of the crime of sacrilege, saying that I'm indeed bad, and in fact blatantly guilty of committing cardinal sin, to even think that our highly sanctified African government officials take advantage of we their people. Please stop me now or forever hold your peace. If indeed we are solely victims, the oppressors and wrongdoers of Africa have done the poorest job in cleaning up their crime scene. Have you seen what remains of Africa today? Since the glorious 1960s liberation, when Africans were seemingly left to their own accord, civil and cross-border disorder has been the name of the game. The Biafran War, the Burundi and Rwanda genocides, the Sudanese split and ongoing rest and Darfur, the Eritrea-Ethiopia standoff, the Tanzania-Uganda disagreements, the annoying permanence of Western-installed lifelong dictators. Post-2010 alone, there's been a total of 39 attempted and successful coups of the continent. But quite rightly so, we are in truth victims. Conflict is costly. Forget our minerals in the ground. Who funds us liquidly? Why is the position as kingpin worth the price? In my African finger-pointing approach, the West is criminalized for its 60-year Ponzi scheme of handing out development aid amounting to over $1.6 trillion and counting. A devil that exposes itself in its detail. Aid's repercussions are as follows. habitual corruption, financing African tyrants to promote their civil chaos agendas, free market suicide, cause of death, Dutch disease, initial symptom, inflation, the indoctrination of a lazy dependency culture, and yes, consequently, drum roll please, the poverty trap, the X-Tale's definitive ending. The chess-playing world has been unrelenting and imposing the chains of the X-Tale onto my dear beloved people, brainwashing them into accepting mental cuffs of inferiority. Africa, Africans, permit me, please, to emancipate you, declare the cataracts of victimhood caused by the X-Tale by deconstructing its story side to the setting, debunking all its myths, and retelling it to you in a manner that you have never perceived before. My hope, my intention, is to put those who want to do something for Africa's real independence in the right frame of mind. I'm ending this pity party. A better story should sound like this. There exists a continent that hosted the earliest primates of humankind. As a start, her easterners created the first fires of this earth. Africa began burning with growth, the showcase of the world's first civilizations, the first dynasty of the Egyptian people of the Nile in Mesopotamia. The people of the mentioned orders created the first wheels, bronze works, sailing boats, monumental buildings, the meticulously engineered pyramids, writing, and yes, mathematics. Backing these inventions were superb orchestrators, today contradictory, non-corrupt African leaders. To expose the West for their bad storytelling practices, let's zoom in shortly on the rule of Her Majesty Cleopatra. Truth be told, Cleopatra VII is the Egyptian leader who brought the country 22 years of stern corruption combat, political stability, and economic prosperity. On the other hand, in European history, all Africans are depicted as apocalyptic savages in their stories. Cleopatra is no exception. She is remembered singly as a seductive beauty who, with her sensational affairs, single-handedly brought Rome down. Contrary to popular belief, Cleopatra did in many whispered ways lift Rome up. After the Roman leader Julius Caesar spent months vacationing in the African comforts of the African Alexandria in the company of the African queen, he returned to Europe in the spirit of plagiarism, taking back African ideas to European soil without any reference of their origins. He popularized the calendar we use today. He encouraged the counting of people as census. He brought novel ideas of new infrastructure, public library, for example, to his dear beloved Rome. To the west, we had the city of Carthage, modern-day Tunisia, ancient Ghana, Ouagadougou, the Empire of Mali, popularized by the world's richest gold-giving Mwansa Musa, the Congo Kingdom, the Great Zimbabwe, and the original forest trading partners of the Arabians and Chinese, the East African Swahili. And proudly, I tell you, Africa was rising. It was indeed a chess-playing continent. In maths, as in history, we have turning points. A turning point is essentially a zero gradient point where change happens. For every epoch of fall that follows, think checkers. For every period of rises, think chess. Independence was a time differentiating chess players from those with checkers. Take Kenya, for example. A country I called home for 5 years is, by my account, a hard-working nation. Whatever craft a Kenyan devotes himself to, they perfect. Inasmuch as I'm a patriotic Zambian, honesty is what I owe myself to first. To compare the general Zambian work ethic to that of Kenya is the equivalent of comparing a chicken's flight to that of an eagle. Why? I suggest that the initial economic systems of choice, post-colonialism, set the mode of thinking for citizens. Jomo Kenyatta had capitalism as the initial order of business, which forced the then-present Kenyans to cultivate a culture of hard work. Zambia, on the other hand, had socialism. Zambian humanism was the one that adopted it. The socialist times of Kawunda were times of giveaways. The government gave everything from free food to free education, free transport to free shelter. I understand the importance of such a regime. In fact, I do believe it was necessary to help Zambians and many other socialist Africans to get on their feet. But a proper withdrawal plan was not discussed. To this day, Zambians like to be given. It was no shocker that the preponderance of voters of the 2011 presidential election fell for, and I quote, "more money in your pockets in 90 days," end quote, political slogan, hook, line, and sinker. Zambians and the greater half of original socialist Africans are short-sighted, a lack of a bigger vision that surely sounds like checkers to me. Angola, a Lusophone state, gained independence from the Portuguese on 11th November 1975. Immediately after, they decided to entertain Cold War parties, the Soviet Union and the United States of America, embarking on a 27-year war fought between groups led by rebel leader Jonas Savimbi and Nationalist Party leader Eduardo dos Santos. In my 3-year stay living in and out of Angola, it is clear to see that she's struggling to stand balance on both feet. Yes, she is Africa's second largest oil producer, but her inequality is nakedly just. As you look through her capital, Rwanda, or other towns like Luena or Porto de Lobito, turning from one neck of her wrist to another, it's questionable as to whether you're looking through the same city, let alone country. Corruption and nepotism are the checkers' problems here. South Africa, a BRICS nation, home of 10 Nobel Prize winners and 89 Olympic medalists, is the continent's second highest GDP flag bearer. On the flip side, Mzansi is blatantly the world's most unequal country, with the highest ranked unemployment in the world, highest rates of gender-based violence in the world, and the host of the largest HIV epidemic on the globe. Her history of racial segregation has meant the people most impacted by the negatives mentioned latterly are Black. Her political and economic landscapes are still blatantly black and white. Angola, Zambia, Kenya, and South Africa, the 4 countries of 55 that I know fairly well, have fairly different development crises. I, like many like me, make point of the working cultures and say that's the reason why their economies are rendered impoverished. But for a continent characterized by their youth, we should all believe that the culture is changeable. Another school of thought may lay the blame on the leaders of nations, who follow misguided economic principles and further the ruinous at the cost of society. Another school of thought may say the country's geography, landlocked positionings, scarce rainfall, a resource scarce, stating that African countries were not set to succeed, whatever that means. I read a little, and I also make a report, the Gladys report. My judgment tells me that Africa's problem is caused by a 3-clear principal agent problem. The African citizens on the ground want to be alleviated of their poverty. The African governmental elite want to maintain their positioning, even if it is at the cost of maintaining the impoverished status quo. The rest of the chess-playing world, multilateral organizations included, want to continue exploiting Africa under whatever guise. To win in this game, at least 2 players must cooperate. Holistically, as it stands today, it is a chess-playing world against a checkers-playing Africa. The coronavirus pandemic is a reset button, a turning point in global history. Should business continue as usual as a bargaining question? For the African third world, now that the tides have fallen, it's crystal clear that their economies have been swimming naked. What now? The power is in the people. All continental populations of the globe have peaked, except the African population. By the year 2035, Africa will be adding more people to the working age than everywhere else in the world combined. By the year 2050, greater than 50% of the world's population will be African, half of whom will be the youth below the age of 25. The African development crisis is about to become the world's development crisis. If you do want to help, know that the people are focused on medium and small enterprises, which provide over 80% of the continent's employment. SMEs are providing a much-needed middle class which will be able to hold governments accountable. The current poster child on how to escape the poverty trap is China, boasting its 70% contribution to global poverty reduction. The Chinese are knocking on African doors in the name of trade, investment, and aid. Yearly, on average, Chinese foreign direct investment and exports are twice and thrice, respectively, compared to those of America. More than a quarter of African external debt is not owed to just multifaceted lenders, but single-faced China. The Chinese are here. The shock of the pandemic arrived at a time when African economies were already rendered defenseless. Between the years 2000 and 2014, African economies were growing at almost doubly as fast as the population. When the Chinese significantly reduced their appetite for African commodities, spectacular growth was disrupted. We have turned the curve. The show of dominance is now being played between the West and the East. Worst case scenario, we should expect a Chinese edition of the exile to unfold. The narrative of slave wages, the scramble for resources and commodities, and then an economic and cultural colonization, which will be retaliated by an independence struggle. Ultimately, the price of freedom will be an impoverished end. As desperate as we are, I know that very few people care about where we'll be in 50 years if the Chinese can give us the money we want today. In dealing with the outside chess-playing world, Africa has been losing. For every $1 of aid allegedly that comes in, $10 leave illegally. The aggressive early century privatization has to this day pronounced African governments incapable of establishing a proper tax collection system that works. French colonies of Africa via the CFA franc have more than 50% of their money reserves in the hands of the French government. The rest of we non-French sub-Saharan banana republics, in the face of a fiscal or monetary crisis, we run to the IMF or the World Bank cap in hand, as is the case for vaccine funding and external debt obligations. What exists today, players of Africa, is a shadow financial system built on the wrecks of colonialism. To sort out Africa's problems, obviously what we need is money, 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 and more money. Remember, 3 clear principal Asian problem. My hope lies in the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is launched at the start of this year. If African governmental elite at the top can cooperate with people at the bottom, it will work. And also, if the issue of tax avoidance is sorted out by global governance being introduced into the scene. In chess, your sole purpose is to defend your king. We analyze peace positions, the dangers and opportunities they present, the probability of our opponent making a particular calming or threatening next move, the likelihood of us winning or losing because of the sacrifices we reckon will place us at an advantage. If we're fortunate enough to maintain accuracy, we might win. But regardless, in real life, it goes beyond your own personal psychology, or whether or not you subscribe to Ntalasha Mwansa's X-Tale. All calculations do in fact tell us that Africa should be winning. The problem is the world is playing on us. This then begs the question, if we African players got out to join the world in its chess playing status, would the world's winning game, which is in fact being played on our backs, continue?